Hey everyone, welcome back. I actually wasn't going to make an episode over the holidays, so consider this a bonus episode. The Christmas one we did last week that we put up, we actually had done earlier, so we did take a bit of time off. Glad you're back with us. We are going to jump back into looking at who we are, why we think the way we think, and how that relates to God and how we see Him. I had a lot of questions and some feedback on what we've done so far, which is great. So we'll continue to dig into it. It's not a small subject, and by no means is what we're going to do conclusive or all-encompassing or anything of the sort. In fact, it's quite rudimentary, but it's a start. So we looked at how some see God as a God of love, some see God as a God of justice, some see God as a God of mercy, and the list of those characteristics is long. But our personality dictates the angle from which we see Him. Our upbringing dictates the angle from which we see Him, or can. Has a huge impact on it. Our upbringing, our everything that forms who we become, language, culture, all of it. It all has a huge part in how we see God. So the thing is, once we have that worldview, that view of Him and how He relates to us and all of it put together, we tend to gravitate towards people who have the same or similar view. The problem with that is that only makes us more entrenched in that view. And now we have the internet, which is designed literally to feed us what they think we want to hear or see. And if we choose to consume that, they give us more and more of it. So if you want to throw around big words like liberal, conservative, whatever those words mean to you, opposite ends of the spectrum, whatever spectrum you choose to embrace, the internet will just give you more and more of it. How does God relate to that? That's what we're going to look at today. So we've looked at how we relate to Him in kind of a very basic way. How does He relate to us? We're going to start with a story. It's a story you may not be familiar with, and if you're not, that's fine. It's in the Old Testament. It's in the book of Joshua. So at this point in Israelites' history, they have come out of Egypt. They have spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness, and now they are entering into the Promised Land. And at this point, they are on the edge of having to attack and take over the very first city, Jericho. So if you've been in church as a kid, you know the story of Jericho. But you might not know this part of the story. You can try and imagine being Joshua. Moses is gone. That alone is huge. Moses was the guy. He was the figurehead. He was the out front person. He was their communication, their direct line with God. He's gone. He has died, and Joshua has been tasked to take his place. Now, Moses, not only has he been tasked to fill shoes that are impossible to fill, but now they're about to undertake something that they never undertook under Moses. Moses never was there at any point when they were conquering the Promised Land. This is all brand new. So you can imagine the cause for fear that would be, which is why when you start reading the book of Joshua, at the very beginning it talks about Joshua needing to be strong and courageous. So Joshua is facing this monumental task, and he's understandably nervous, afraid, however you want to characterize that. I don't want to project onto him emotions that perhaps he was or wasn't feeling, but definitely nervous. And just before they're undertaking this monumental task, this being comes to Joshua. I'm going to read it to you. Came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted his eyes and he looked. And behold, a man stood beside him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" And he said, "No, but as commander of the army of the Lord have I now come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped. And he said to him, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" And the Lord said to Joshua, "Take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. There's lots we could get into here that we're not going to. This is similar to Moses when he was at the burning bush. God's presence was there, and he said, "Take off your sandal. The place you stand is holy." It's like God is officially confirming to Joshua, "You are my guy for this time and this place. You don't need to be afraid." That's all there. But that's not what we're going to look at today. What we're going to look at today is that Joshua asked him, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" At that point, Joshua had no idea who this person was. He just knew that he was an imposing person ready for battle, and he wanted to know, is this guy with me or is he against me? And what I want you and I to notice is that the person's answer, and this is Jesus, commander of the Lord's army, take your shoes off, it's holy ground, accepting worship from Joshua. This is Jesus 100%. And Jesus says to Joshua, "No. You gave me the options. Am I for you or for your enemies?" My answer is no. The reason I bring this up is because as we struggle to find out who God is and to figure out who God is, we are struggling through a sea of our own biases and our own ideas and our own perspective. But God is who he is, regardless of how we see him. If our picture is sort of tiny, if our picture is big, or our picture is skewed way one way or way the other way, whatever our picture is, it doesn't matter. God is who he is, regardless of how we see him. And one thing about God is that he is not for and against. That's a human thing. So when I showed you that box, and we'll probably throw it up on the screen again, and you have people on different sides, God is just, and God is love, and God is hate, and God is mercy. And there's people huddled to those opinions. And they huddle there with people of like mind, and they naturally, once they huddle there with people of like mind, they naturally look with suspicion at best and with contempt at worst at people who stand elsewhere and look at God from a different perspective. But none of that changes who he is. And our proclivity, our tendency to other people and treat them as less than because they see God differently, or they don't worship God at all, and they're atheists, or whatever umbrella they choose to stand under. And then we ask God, "God, are you for us or are you for them?" And his answer is, no. No. Just as an aside before we continue, when people push you into a corner and say, choose A or B, choose option 1 or option 2, don't fall for it. There are very few situations where you only have 2 options. And when Jesus was given 2 options by Joshua, his answer was no. No. I'm not for you and against them. I'm not for them and against you. No. I have come as captain of the Lord's army. And we know what that means. Because when Jesus came later as one of us, he said, "I came to seek and to save the lost." So when the captain of the Lord's army shows up, Jesus, he's not there to win a war. He's not there to defeat anyone. He's there to rescue. He's there to save. Well, what happened in Jericho? Well, let me tell you. In case you've forgotten the story, or in case you just want a refresher. When they came to Jericho, they sent spies into the city to have a look. It was a habit they had, not really a good habit. When God asks us to do something, we don't need to worry about the optics of it or the circumstances of it. If he said we can do it, it's going to get done. The spies go in, and they go to the local brothel. Now, why they did that, you can surmise, you can guess. On the positive end of the spectrum, the brothel was probably also a hotel. You could serve either purpose, and so they were there for the hotel aspect. That's probably the reason why they were there. If you're really skeptical and you want to twist it and make it scandalous, then they were there for other reasons. Either way, that's where they were. The woman who ran the brothel was named Rahab. And Rahab, when she found out who they were, she said, "Our people are terrified. We know what your God has done for you. We know how he opened the sea and you walked across on dry land, and then he closed the sea and swallowed up the Egyptian army. We know how he fed you in the wilderness. We know. Chances are Rahab was either a child or possibly not even born when these Israelites crossed the Red Sea. But she knew about it, and all the people in her town knew about it. What God was doing for Israel was spreading throughout Canaan. So while Israel was outside of Jericho, terrified that they wouldn't be able to take the city, the people inside were terrified that they were going to take the city because God was with them. But Jesus was there for an entirely different purpose. Jesus doesn't come to help them beat them. There's no othering with Jesus. Jesus was on a rescue mission. So when Rahab told them that she knew who their God was, and that the people were terrified, and that she wanted to be on God's side, those spies said something amazing. They said, "Listen, you, your family," in fact, Rahab wasn't even concerned so much with herself. If you read the story directly from the Bible, it was her family she was concerned about, because love is never self-centered or self-concerned. It's always other-centered and other-concerned. But the spies told her, "Listen, Rahab, you and anyone you can put in this place, God will spare them. All you need to do is hang a scarlet cord from the window. God will preserve this place." Anyone. Didn't ask if they were liberal or conservative, didn't ask if they were straight or gay, didn't ask if they were smart or stupid, fat or skinny. Anyone. Now, you know the story of how the city went down. God said, "I want you to march around the city once a day for 6 days. On the seventh day, I want you to march around 7 times. When you march around the 7th time, blow your trumpets." When they blew the trumpets, there was a great earthquake, and the city fell down. Israel didn't touch the city. Joshua, his people, never touched the city. It went down on its own. That scarlet thread had nothing to do with it. Israel had no control over whether or not Rahab's house, which was actually literally built into the wall of the city, whether it stood or fell, they had no control over that. But it stood. Not only did it stand, but Rahab married into the Israelites. Rahab had a child. That child had a child, and so on and so on. Rahab was one of the ancestors of Jesus himself. So Jesus that day saved her. Hundreds of years later, he was born as a baby in Bethlehem from her line. Jesus is in the saving business. So while we're running around trying to figure out not only what God is like, but how other people relate to him and where they stand, and if we can agree with them or disagree with them, and if we can talk to them or not talk to them, and if they can be in our church or not be in our church, or whether I'm going to go to church at all because they don't think right and do right. While we're doing all of that, Jesus is just trying to save people, whether they're Israelite, Jericho, Canaanite, Egyptian. Jesus just wants to save people. That's the kind of God that he is. So as we continue this journey into understanding why we think the way we think and where we are and how we relate to God. I just wanted to make this video over the holiday season to remind us that we serve a God who's in the saving business, not the othering business. God bless.